All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's see. Are we live? We are live. Welcome, everyone, to our little book study for Monday, the 25th of October, 2021. Here comes Stuart. John Lavenia, excuse me, John Lavenia, who's still getting over this little cough. But here with you, as always. Good to see you guys. Tonight, we are covering the second law of habit creation or formation, which is to make it attractive. All right. So chapters 8, 9, and 10, second law, make it attractive. And I'll tell you what, I got some good insights out of this. This was, although I think rather, well, I shouldn't say, to be assumed or basic, because, the proof is in, the statistics, right? Are people actually doing this stuff? And I think in many cases, the answer is, well, sometimes. Right. But we're looking for consistency. We're looking for, a foolproof way, I think, with this book and in this teaching to, have habits that actually serve us. So that being said, yeah, Stuart, why does everything have to be a law? Well, it sells books, you see, right? Who's John Maxwell, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, right? That's kind of funny. All right. Sold some books though. So good stuff, you guys. Who's got some thoughts on these chapters 8, 9, and 10, which hopefully you've read? Come on down. The Ricardos usually get us started. Lucy and Ricky, would you like to get us started tonight?
I read them yesterday,
Uh-huh.
so they went out of my mind, but this is the hardest thing for me, getting these habits started. Yes, continued, I find difficult because of the shiny objects of the work and the dentist and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I am working harder. I am not trying. I am working harder toward it. And one thing that I've really got going is, if you want to call it exercise, you wouldn't, but for me it is doing push-ups against the wall, things like this, isometrics, doing go you chicken fat, go with my arms. It's all I can do right now. And I went for a walk. I walked to the dentist just up the block, but
Yeah,
I am making it a habit. And I look forward to it. That's a big difference for me too.
uh-huh.
The stacking,
Well, that's what he said. Make it attractive, right? So make it something you want to do.
I got to
And we
get
can do-
stronger for my health.
Okay. Well, we can do that. I mean, he gave some examples in these chapters about, rather than looking at it as, going and exercising with weights or whatever at the gym, going and, securing your health for the future and becoming strong and vibrant, right? So that's what I'm going to do.
That's right.
So a little bit of a mindset shift. But you mentioned something that one of the first things that I had highlighted in chapter 8, where he said humans are also prone to fall for exaggerated versions of reality. Right. So what was the example he gave? Was the seagulls pecking on the red dot?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Or
Ducks.
the bird that would like take a volleyball, like the bigger the egg-shaped thing was, the more fervently they were like, I need to go sit on that thing, So how does that relate to what we're doing here? We're obviously prone to reacting to stimuli that seem, or that were programmed in as pleasing to us. Why do we peck on the red dot? I don't know. And 3 red dots. Wow, let's peck our asses off, right? I mean, yeah, now we got something to peck on, you see. So what he said here is, the more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to become habit forming. So, and I guess it all comes down to the dopamine thing, right? Which I'm sure Stuart and others here could talk about, right? There was that whole study on the rats or whatever, where somehow they inhibited dopamine and they lost the will to even, eat and drink and reproduce, right? Which rats do quite readily. And yeah, they died. So what do you guys think about all that?
Horrifying.
Yeah.
But God put it in there for a reason, and we must work to keep it up. And I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. I probably lost 2 ounces of dopamine on that.
Okay. Well, here's the thing though. So since we have the ability to produce that, and I know we can have a whole conversation about like people seeking drugs and artificial stimulation to either heighten or deaden, hormones and mind altering chemicals, stuff like that. But think, if you will, about anyone who, or maybe you could see at some point in your past, right, where you've lacked purpose, maybe you've felt like apathetic. Why bother trying? There's no use, right? So that's sort of an apathetic state. I would say it's pretty well bereft of dopamine, right? And so you may go through the motions of putting food in your mouth to survive as a body, but only to survive as a body, right? For whatever purpose, which we haven't identified here yet, right? So when I think about that, and I think in contrast to hopefully everybody here, right? You're very purposeful. You've got enthusiasm, for life to whatever degree, right? I'm not saying that you're necessarily bubbly and jumping up and down, although that's a possibility, right? But still, you're purposeful. And so when I anticipate, what did he talk about in the book? When we anticipate, here's going to be the fruits of this action, I get the dopamine hit now. Like, I shall now do on purpose, high integrity action. I feel good about that. Okay. Now I don't have like a dopamine meter hooked up or anything. So I don't know, scientifically the measurements or whatever, but I know when I'm in on purpose action, I feel good. And when I feel good, I do good. And there's the upward spiral, as opposed to what's the use, right? Janet, you've got a hot mic. You got thoughts about this?
Well, yeah, a little bit. So I'm thinking, if I'm not eating and I have to be aware of my body and aware of my sensations and things like that. But if I'm not eating and I'm dying, my will to live is stronger than my depression to not. And I say that that's depression when you're in that kind of state. And I was in deep depression for maybe 6 months, and I didn't care about anything. I really just didn't care. So I've been there and felt that. But I'm thinking that at some point, my will to survive is going to take over my not caring about eating at all. So I'm not sure that I'm completely on board with that.
Well, he was talking about rats.
All life has a survival thing, or at least all animal life.
Okay.
And even plant life, even plants, when they aren't getting the water that they need, it's very interesting to watch them select what's going to remain alive and what is going to be sacrificed, so that the plant overall can be, can survive. It's a very interesting thing. Different plants do it in different ways, but they sacrifice parts of themselves in order for the whole to survive. So
I see.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
And I don't know how I got out of depression, because I was really, really, really. It was that I lost connection with someone, but there is a point of saying, I just, I don't care. I really don't care. But I didn't ever starve myself or do something that meant that the vehicle was going to not continue.
Okay.
And I think that I don't know why that happened, because rats are living, feeling things, and they also know this isn't working, and what do I do to to survive? I think survival instinct is very, very strong in everything.
Of course. Yeah, I totally agree. And that's a pretty dark, example that he gave in the book, and do with it what you will. But I think the teaching of it carries water, and that is, it says here, when it comes to habits, the key takeaway is this: dopamine is released not only when you experience pleasure, but also when you anticipate it. So if I'm, living on purpose and doing good work and, all that, Does that qualify? Yeah. Yeah. And I say that as a person who had a history with mind altering chemicals and all that as an adolescent, right? And at that time, what am I doing with my life? Purposeless. So for me, that's real for me, right? That depression or that, you know, surviving at the bare basic levels, but not quite sure why.
But John, you also have told us that you you kind of saw the light. You saw that you were going to a lot of funerals.
Oh yeah.
And you realized that the actions that you were taking was not going to lead, forget purposeful. You were on survival. You were, how do I survive? And you came up with the conclusion that in order to survive, you had to change what you were doing. I don't think that was dopamine. I think that was survival.
Okay. So what Janet's talking about is either having or creating a high necessity level, right? To move forward, to do something, in anticipation, which is what the author's talking about here, anticipating pleasure or, reward or, some survival kind of action, which would cause us to be more likely to engage in a productive activity. So what he's talking about here is setting ourselves up for success. What are these? Where do we get these dopamine hits from? And a lot of times it has to do with what we crave. But is that something manufactured? Is that something we can decide for ourselves? What did he say here in the book? The fact that the brain allocates so much precious space to the regions responsible for craving and desire provides further evidence of the crucial role these processes play. Desire is the engine that drives behavior. Every action is taken because of the anticipation that precedes it. It is the craving that leads to the response. Okay, and there's more to that story. Okay, that's just a couple of sentences there. And some people have dug really deep into this stuff. But when I look at my own experience, any success that I've had was preceded by action, obviously. Okay. And that action was preceded by what? Motivation, willingness to act, right? The decision to act. Yes, this will be good and right. Let me make a decision. Let me take action. So I'm motivated. But that motivation was preceded by the belief. Yes, the belief that, yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yes, if I take this action, it will bear fruit. And I haven't always been right. Okay. But will this move me in the direction of my goals, my desires, my purposes, whatever? Yes. Okay, great. Take the action. Otherwise I would have never been motivated and I would have never gotten the result, whether it was a spectacular one or a small one or whatever. Right. So the belief that I could, the anticipation of reward, was the antecedent to, everything else that came after that. So, and a lot of times that was preceded by the evidence that I got, Janet's giving me credit here that I saw the light or something. I had people show up in my life, whether they knew it or not, as mentors, who were able to demonstrate, here's where this path leads and here's where that one leads, right? Choose. And by the grace of God, I was, willing to observe, right? I had eyes to see, at least momentarily. So yeah. Bob, Missy?
The cat wrecked my mind. She won't leave me alone.
Profound.
I was going to talk about the diet and again, I'm so sorry, everybody. I lost my train of thought again. The cat is nonstop meowing.
Okay.
She thoughts are things for this cat. This cat gets whatever she thinks about. She's never failed.
All right.
But
back to the book. Did you have something you wanted to share?
I did. I forgot. I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's all right. We'll come back to you. Let's hear from the Llama King himself. Hey, Stuart, come on out, brother.
Hey guys, good to see you. Good to see everybody here. Oh, Monday, baby.
Was it a good Monday?
It was a good Monday. I got a lot done today.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, there's times in my life where the day of the week doesn't matter. And I know you said it, you had a weekend that didn't feel like a weekend, right?
Yeah.
Of late for me, I don't know, man. One day is the same as the next. You're working and all that. But yeah, Monday implied, that you're getting back to business and contacting businessy people that, you can only get in touch with on Mondays and things like that. So yeah. Chapter 8, man, the second law, right? I like where he's going. I like the concept that our brains are hardwired to look for certain clues or cues or stimuli, right? And you were talking about the dots on the cardboard beak. The bird doesn't care that it's a fake beak. It's going for the red dot because it's hardwired to do that, whether it's genetic memory or ancestral memory, but it's all hardwired into survival, right? It's all about what's going to continue the species, right? If the goose doesn't sit on the egg, then there's no chick or whatever the goose equivalent of such a thing is. Talks about supernormal stimuli, right? That larger than life, exaggerated versions of things. And I think it's interesting, even if we think about, how we attract mates or how we put ourselves out in the world or whatever it is, right? There's definitely this tendency to, over exaggerate, whether it's, peacocking, for the guys or, cosmetic surgery to, over exaggerate certain things that, we tend to be naturally attracted to or whatever it is. Very interesting. But yeah, this concept of like the paleo instincts is something that I really can relate to, right? And he gives the example of we have this tendency to gorge or overeat, and it comes from this ancestral understanding that you don't know where your next meal is coming from, right? And so better to eat it all at once, right? And we're just kind of so messed up in our modern version of everything that, we turn that into like eating the whole box of Oreos or whatever that might be, right? But
What did he say it was? Sugar, salt, and fat, as I recur?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
The whole
And that was
time.
another cool thing, right? Some vocabulary words, oral sensation, right? The how it feels in your mouth. And of course, French fries and pizza, he's talking my language, right? And what was the other one? Dynamic contrast, where it's about the combination of sensations, right? And so we like the crunchy and the gooey with the crust and the cheese and all that kind of stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
cool.
That was really interesting. Yeah. The Oreo cookie.
Right, the Oreo cookie, totally. And yeah, he's saying society is filled with highly engineered versions of reality, and it's not by mistake, right? And this ties into like marketing, advertising, and he talks about like the food industry. He kept using examples and how if you look at any product, they're not necessarily creating a new motivation. They're sort of playing on your existing attraction to certain things. They're not trying to create a new drive for you to like this or that. It's really just playing on your innate psychology, of what we're naturally drawn to. Some of these things are really just amazing, and you hit on all this stuff, right? The everything, dopamine habits are dopamine driven. The rats lost the will to live. They didn't crave anything. There was no craving. Cravings were eliminated. The rats died in a few days. Without dopamine, desire dies. Without desire, action stopped. I think Napoleon Hill would be right on board with that, right? Without desire, you don't get anywhere. You got to have the desire. And then, of course, the opposite was the same, where they upped the dopamine on the rats, and then all of a sudden they were like getting things done or whatever it was. They increased their productivity.
Yeah, poking their head through the hole like 800 times an hour.
Right. Yeah. And then what was the correlation he made to people where like we do that 600 times an hour or something like that?
Tumbling, pulling the lever on a,
But isn't it interesting that like the whole, let's call it the back end of social media and Facebook and things like that, it's all designed so that it's like a slot machine, and that you want to keep hitting the button, and your phone is like a little, it's like a machine like that, where it plays on all those natural instincts. And yeah, we predict the opportunity in anticipation of the reward. and that it's not just when you experience pleasure, but it's in the anticipation of. And he said that our brain has more neuroconnectivity for wanting things than liking things. So it's all about the craving versus the fulfillment of the craving, right? That we have more, we're more hardwired for the wanting, for the prediction of a reward. I thought that was very cool. Then he gets into like temptation bundling. I thought that was cool. And, you know, and combining that with habit stacking. And what was the example? After I do the thing that I normally do, then I will do the thing that I need to do. And after I do the thing that I need to do, I can do the thing that I want to do, right? And so it's really, it's kind of like, how do we trick ourselves into doing the things that we need to do, right? And then we reward ourselves by doing the thing that you want to do, right? And obviously there's a zillion examples.
You know, could I park on that and the previous thing you just talked about? Because Stuart, you had what you just talked about was something that I attempt to deliberately train into, like my daughter, who wants to, you know, go have fun and do, you know, off-purpose stuff and diversions and whatever. And if I could get her to take care of her responsibilities first, right? I think it'd be so pleasing for her, because now, hey, I'm done with that. I don't have to think about it anymore. Now I get to go do the fun thing. But instant gratification seems to be the way of society for a lot of stuff.
Sure, eat dessert first. I mean, you know, really.
Right. So can we just have a little discipline, please? And then the other thing you mentioned was this whole idea of anticipation, the chase being better than the catch, right? So I'm thinking about, if there's the dopamine, if we've got more, and I'm not the doctor guy with the science and the synapses, what I don't know, okay? But according to what was written in the book here, we've got more receptors or whatever for anticipation than we do have, you know, for the actual having or the enjoyment of the thing. So does this not also set up a habit of always chasing more? Which right there, I'm going to say, is that resourceful? Is that right? Okay, so it's never enough. Ooh, so I'm always lacking. Is that my habitual way of operating? Is that I always have to chase? Maybe, right? Let's look around. And much of my history, I could see that. That's real. So can I not just sit here and be grateful for what I have, for, you know? So that's an interesting setup right there.
Well, doesn't he say later on, he kind of addresses that we can overcome some of those things that are hardwired in us. Was it in chapter 9? When it comes to like conformity and our impulses to be part of the group and things like that, which is fascinating to me, because I tend to think of myself as a nonconformist, right? But he says things like, first you want to fit in, then once you fit in, then you want to figure out a way that you can stand out or whatever. I just thought that was pretty interesting, right? The last thing I wrote about chapter 8, and maybe those of you that are musically inclined, maybe my friend John will catch this reference. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat, right? And this concept of, you know, that's a Pink Floyd reference, if anybody got that. But that concept of giving yourself a reward after you know, whatever, eat your broccoli and then you can have dessert or whatever. We all did this with our kids, right? Clear your plate or whatever it is, and then you can have the dessert. The chapter 9 thing I thought was interesting with the chess grandmasters, right? And
That was weird.
all this behaviorism stuff is fascinating to me, because on the one hand, like I know that, what is it, Skinner or Erickson, one of those guys like kept their kid locked in a box, right? Do you know about all that? Like to do the studies of what it's like to have no external stimuli, whatever. Like if you look into like some of the behaviorist stuff, they didn't know, or maybe they just, you know, were so disconnected from humanity that, you know, they were more interested in understanding what makes us tick and human behaviors and things like that. That, yeah, one of these guys like kept his daughter like in a box for years to like see how she would behave after, you know, having such limited stimulus or whatever. But what's the thing with it? Like it's about, and I almost thought like nurture versus nature, where, you know, the guy's got, first of all, how weird that the guy writes the letter to the woman and is like, I'd like to, you know, create, like, what is it? He doesn't think talent is innate. And so he thinks that it can be, anybody can become a genius with the right circumstances. And so he writes a letter to a woman asking her to like be his wife and the mother of his children.
Yeah. Wow. There's that.
But then
And it worked out. Yeah.
And then they raised 3 chess grandmasters, who's like the youngest one ever, and all this kind of stuff. Fascinating. And then he gets into what, like, it's about culture, and they prioritized and they praised and rewarded certain activities, and it created these kids that were not necessarily oppressed by their chess playing, right? They loved it. They couldn't get enough of it. So that was fascinating to me. And then we want to fit in. We want respect and approval of our peers and our friends. And again, going back to our paleo ancestors, it's like essential to our survival. I think about that concept of fitting in and belonging. And like back in the day, like the worst thing that could happen to you was you got exiled. You got kicked out of the gates of the village, right? It was like worse than death, right? Because then you were on your own out in the wilderness or whatever it was. You would rather be hung in the town square than be exiled, right? And now I think, you could call that FOMO, right? Or fear of missing out or whatever it is, right? And even with like the social credit score, and this is obviously a whole other discussion, but this concept of, you're excluded from the community if you don't, do things in a certain way or whatever. Deepest desire that we have is to belong, right? And then he talks about like the 3 things that motivate us, right? What was it? The close, the many, and the powerful, right? I thought that was very cool. And that we tend to imitate the behaviors. Our first behaviors are the ones that we like learn from those that are closest to us, our family, our friends, our peers, or whatever it is, right? And that there's social norms and visible rules that guide our behavior. I don't know if anybody else does this, but when I was listening to him talk about like when you talk to somebody and sometimes you find yourself like imitating the person's like body posture, but Fonz totally got that right. Or sometimes like if you're on vacation and all of a sudden you start like talking in the accent of the local people or whatever it is, right?
I gotta admit something about that. I think you guys are being funny.
What did you say?
So I gotta admit something about that. So I have the tendency to speak Spanglish when I'm in a Mexican restaurant, and my wife, John, stop it, right? So like the waiter will come over. I would like a burrito, burrito. and she's like, John, he speaks English just fine, like, yeah, I don't know why, but it's kind of like I want to get into their culture, man. And it's nothing that I'm doing to attempt to be offensive or anything like that. I just, yeah, so some people call this, the deliberate practice of like neurolinguistic programming, right? Matching and mirroring and stuff like that, which I guess unconsciously, putting on like the Spanglish accent or something, and it's just unconscious. And so, and granted, I live right down the street is Mexico, right? I'm in Arizona. However, to do that, let's say just in my normal culture, right? So here I am doing business and this and that. I had a guy tell me that, John, you're like a master of neurolinguistic programming. And I'm like, I kind of rejected it. I mean, I studied a little bit about it. I'm like, yeah, this is bullshit. I'm just going to go have a conversation now with, my customer. And he said, well, yeah, you do it without thinking about it. It's like automatic. I'm like, well, okay, if you say so. I don't know. So anyway, back to you, Stuart. I didn't mean to hijack that. I just thought the Spanglish thing was funny.
He gives me a hard time about that all the time, no matter where we go or whatever. And, okay, I speak near fluent Spanish, so I have a tendency to do that more. And of course, here where I live in northern New Mexico, I live in a community that's 90-something% Hispanic, and so and what would you say like that, or what's the saying that imitation is a high form of
flattery?
Flattery, right? There you go. Right.
Okay.
So I mean, so on the one hand, yeah, maybe awkward, but on the other hand, and I can tell that we both would be coming from a place of respect, not trying to, make fun of anybody.
Ah, yeah.
I see Lindsay's hand up. What's up, Lindsay?
Hey, Lindsay.
I just
Lindsay,
wanna
give us
say-
some Spanglish over here. Come on.
I don't know any Spanglish. I'm German, remember? But no, when I went to New Jersey, I can talk as fast as John, talk just like
No.
I'm just playing.
Yeah. She immersed herself in that culture. And next thing you know, she's like a rocket ship with her words. Yeah.
Yep, I can talk that fast.
So I don't know, maybe this is another thing. And being a recovering East Coaster living out West, whenever I get around, people from the Northeast in particular, all of a sudden I can feel my grit or my abrasiveness or whatever it is. I think John, you and I were talking like a week or two ago, and I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I dropped a lot of F-bombs talking to John Lavenia. Like it was like off platform. We were just talking. It was like the New Jersey guy and the New York guy. And all of a sudden I'm like, yeah. Anyway, what I like, then he starts getting into like this, you're the average of the people that you hang out with, right? And the MIT class where like 4 out of 10 people became astronauts or whatever it was, right? And this concept that you're the average of the 5 people you hang out the most with, or whatever that is, whether it's financially or anything else, right? That and I think that does go back to this concept of culture, right? He says to like join a group of people that have the same desires or the same interests as you. And what was that? That we rise together. I like that, right? Join a culture where the normal behavior is the one you desire. And I think, if we were to sum up the Success Mastermind in, a sentence or less, it might be that.
There you go.
Ricardo's.
Yeah, the Ricardos are here.
It's Ricky.
Eh.
What Stuart just said reminded me of something that I came to this conclusion many years ago. And I think that we tend to project ourselves on the people that we know. That we feel we are right at the top of the bell curve. We're right at the median. And, people who tend to be gifted in one way or another can't understand those who are less gifted because they think they're normal. They think that everyone should have the gift that they have, and they don't understand it. And Stuart, I think you spoke volumes just now when you said this summarizes what the Success Mastermind Group is all about. We are trying to surround ourselves with people among whom we feel that we are right at the top of the bell curve with. We're in a normal group of people for ourselves. And that's pretty much all I really wanted to throw out there. If anybody, I'd be curious to hear if anybody has, a different opinion. But again, this is something that years ago, I came to the conclusion that we just look at ourselves as, well, I'm the normal one. I can't understand why others aren't exactly the same as I am.
That's true in my case. I don't know about the rest of everybody.
Wow. Well, I see what Virginia just wrote in the chat. Okay, so that's interesting. So we have standards, right? Or we have mores, we could say, in our cultures, plural, right? So we've got this portion of society here and that one there. And I remember interesting story, and Bob and everyone, you may find this interesting, but I went to Fiji. And while we were touring around Fiji, we noticed that around the villages, there were these split rail fences made of wood, right? And then on top of each of the posts of the fence, there's a rock, and it's white. It's like painted white, okay? And I asked the guide after a while, well, this is such and such village, and this is that village, right? And I said, what's with all the white rocks? And he said, well, up until recently, this was known as the Cannibal Islands. And those used to be skulls. And so that would denote, here's what happens to intruders in this village, right? See the skulls. And it wasn't good for tourism. So they made white rocks. Okay. So, but that's totally normal, right? I'm just hanging out in the village over here. We caught an intruder. Well, great. What's for dinner?
Intruder.
Totally normal, right? Yeah. So whereas you and I, and that's an extreme contrast. Okay. But I guess that's the point, right? Where I have, the mores of my household or of, the people I associate with, that could seem completely foreign to the person who, I don't know, let's use something pretty far out, who's, living riotously, gambling and prostitution and, Vegas. Okay. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Lots of other people apparently get it. Who's right? Of course, me. I'm right. No, Missy's right. Of course.
If I could just jump in, because John, your story about Fiji reminded me about the story I was told about a businessman who was actually sent to his firm's offices in Haiti. And he knew nothing about the Haitian culture. He didn't know what he was getting himself into. He was just the proverbial babe in the woods. And people thought, this is going to be culture shock for this guy. Well, he did his 6 or 9 months in Haiti, and he came back and he was pumped for information. Well, what was it like? What's it like? Because everyone's thinking about voodoo and all this other tribal stuff. And he said, oh, the people couldn't have been nicer. Said, really? Yeah. Every day I would go out and there'd be a chicken nailed to the post of my door. He made sure that he had no idea what the chicken nailed to the door meant. But for him, well, sometimes ignorance can be bliss.
Yes.
So,
was that like a bad thing, or was that dinner?
I guess it was some sort of curse.
Oh, I see. Right.
I don't know. I've never studied voodoo or
It
anything like
wasn't
that.
dinner.
But
You thought it was their version of Grubhub, Uber Eats or something,
yeah.
Right.
Oh my God. As everything unfolds in our collective relationships here, one of the things that I don't think I've shared with anybody or with you, John, is that how I met Leah. Leah is a dancer, and when I met her, she had just come back from Senegal studying West African dance, and I have been a student of traditional Afro-Caribbean hand drumming. And my drum teacher is a high priest in the Vodun religion. So when you mentioned Haiti there, Bob, I got all kinds of info that I can share with you guys about Haiti. But the chicken is like the smudge stick that we have here in New Mexico. So the native people here, the Pueblo people in the Southwest, and maybe John, you know this too, they take the sage that grows, all over the place out here. They bundle it up. And exactly, Janet, the shaman, of course, understands the concept of invocation and clearing energy and things like that. And so, yeah, you light the smudge stick, you go around the house, you clear the energy in your room or whatever. To the Haitians, it's the chicken. And in a lot of these Vodou ceremonies, they literally will take a chicken and they wipe you down with the chicken, and then they sacrifice the chicken. But it's this, paganistic concept of absorbing all the bad energy, and then, you give it back to God or whatever. Very interesting. We'll talk about Haiti a little more another time.
Wow.
But, one of the other things that I really enjoyed about, chapter 9, was the conformity experiments. And I don't know if anybody had any exposure to that before, but I've seen this as an example in several other places. And, I've been thinking, again, I identify as a nonconformist. And so when I hear these things or see, you know, these experiments, you know, it touches me. And the concept that, what was it, 75% of people were more likely to pick the answer that they knew was wrong in their heart, just so that they could fit in with the group. And the more people that were in the group, the more likely you were to go along with it, because you didn't want to be the stupid one or the whatever, the oddball that, you know, whatever, the emperor has no clothes, right? Or whatever it is. But that to me is that concept. And that just kind of blew me away.
Right. Or everything for the party. Right.
Mhm.
So you look at on national scales, right? Communism and stuff like this, right? Here's all these people conforming to a narrative. Hey, Sonia's got a hot mic. Sonia's got some thoughts about this.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, hey, don't be sorry. Come on, we've been waiting to hear from you.
All right. So
Are
I
you
just gave my
cold? Look
dip.
at you. You're bundled
I'm
up.
freezing. Yes, I'm freezing. It's like 4 degrees and he had to come and turn on the heat. But and I just worked out, so I'm tired and cold. But no, I loved the idea of I wanted to touch on Eric Braverman wrote a book called The Edge Effect, where he talked about how dopamine, the neurotransmitters, the dopamine, serotonin, GABA, and acetylcholine can be used and modified by the foods that you eat to bring out certain characteristics in yourself so that you can attain goals. And I think it's really cool that this author in Atomic Habits brought that concept back into the conversation. So it's nice to see it brought up, because it can be very effective if it's used correctly. And most people that are very successful are dopamine driven. They like the high they get from succeeding, so they keep succeeding. So I think that was really cool.
Mm.
And I forget the next point I was going to say. Sorry.
Oh, this must be the night of drifting attentions. Missy and Sonia.
Almost Spirit was just talking about it too. Oh my goodness, I've forgotten about it already. But and I don't have a cat to blame.
Oh.
I want to jump on what Sonia just said, because there's, you know, and this concept of dopamine, I too really appreciated that that the author brought all this into play, because it does, you know, we're what was it in Dorothy Brand's book? She talks about that, you know, we're ruled by our hormones and, you know, our brain chemistry and our body chemistry and things like that. There's another thing about dopamine, that not only do we get a dopamine hit when we're talking about rewards, but we, going back to this genetic memory, this survival instinct to fit in and to belong, we get huge dopamine hits when we participate in group activities. And, you know, when you look into the psychology of religion, politics, team sports, things like that, right? We get these huge dopamine hits when we go along with the group. When you go to a concert and everybody's, you know, whatever at the same time, or you go to you know, church or a spiritual gathering and everybody's chanting at the same time, or things like that, you get massive rewards in the form of, you know, feeling your belonging. Janet, what do you think?
Well, I was going to go someplace else, but I was just going to say, I think I now know that I'm a dopamine addict. And the reason is because I think that's the whole thing about the last minute, waiting until the last minute, because you just get this rush of, you know, rather than being on purpose like we're supposed to be. It's like the longer I wait, the more of a rush I'm going to get, because now it's panic time and I have to get it done. So maybe that has answered that. You know, there's the, if not for the last minute, nothing would get done. Not in this group, of course, but I think it's useful to find out how to get the dopamine ahead of time, so that I don't wait till the last minute. So I'm sorry, Stuart, that was what was burning in my head.
No, I love it. What else was I going to say?
Well, Janet, do you think that it's actually, I don't know all the science behind it, but is it actually dopamine, or is it just that now you've got urgency? Is it anxiety? Is that how you operate, from anxiety?
Um,
Or maybe adrenaline.
well, adrenaline is going to be in there. I don't know which chemicals. I'm just thinking. I wanted to be a chemist when I was in high school, but that was a little while ago. I'm just thinking that there is something to do with, oh yeah, I'm going to do it, and then, and maybe it's, maybe in getting your book together and saying, okay, these 2 hours are for this and this is for that, sets up that kind of reward thing as well. Good, I could check it off, it's done. But I think that there's something in there that I want to look at more thoroughly for myself in why I tend to do that. I mean, I'm not really high in confidence, so it's not like, oh yeah, I can do it. I don't have to, worry about it. But there's, I don't know, there's just something in there that I feel I need to do. And this thing about belonging and stuff, I think we will do a lot. We will do a lot for the reward of either being accepted or being loved. And I think we do an awful lot to get a word of praise from someone we admire. We'll go to great lengths to get that done. So that kind of fits into, Stuart, what you were talking about and stuff like that. I just think that's yeah, that's an important part.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. We'll hear from the Ricardos again, and then I think we're going to wrap up here pretty soon. Ricky?
I think, Janet, the answer to your question may lie in the craving to get the thing done doesn't occur until the last minute. So I'm just trying to fit in what, the experience is with what is in chapter 9 here, that, if we have the dopamine rush as part of the craving for it, so now you've hit the wall, now you really crave it, so now you get buckled down and you get to work on it. Before then, you haven't created a craving to get the task done. So therefore, you continue to put it off. And then day by day, the craving gets a little bit stronger until finally the craving becomes irresistible. And then you do it.
I don't know if that's craving. It's like the guy in her book who just did everything and then that became his way of life in that book, because he thought, oh, this is how I get things done. Because that's how I was when I was a kid. I wouldn't do my homework. And all of a sudden it would be Sunday night at 9 o'clock. And my mother's going, did you do your homework? And Ed Sullivan was coming on. I didn't have time to do homework. But that took me a long way. And it's a very bad way. You've got to get out of that, Janet. You've got to look at it. And you've got to, it's not, I don't agree with Bob that it's a craving. It's just panic driven. Holy crap, I got to get this done or I'm in trouble. And it's just not a good way.
Well, it's not habitual though, in the way that, we've got non-doing this and then suddenly a burst of action, right? So what we're talking about in this book is atomic habits, right? Not atomic, spurts of sudden energy after doing nothing. So, right.
No, but there's slow doing this, and then there's like, I've got to buckle down and really, no, I totally agree with you. It's not a good way to go, but just as a level of understanding what might be going on on an unconscious level in a way, and for me, once I understand something, that's then when I can do something about it. Before I see it, before I know it, I can't understand it. Before I understand it, I can't do anything about it.
That's right.
Beautiful. Thank you. Awesome. So yeah, Stuart's saying here in the chat, so the question is, why do we procrastinate? Well, indecision, but, all right, you lose. right?
I
Hey, Virginia, the
been
cookie
piddling around.
queen.
I've been piddling around in the kitchen. That's why I haven't had my video on.
Okay.
So, Dr. Phil, I love him or don't love him, whatever. He used to have a book years ago, and one of his points was that people do what they want, people do what works. And basically, I put it off too. I heard a joke the other day that running late was my cardio workout. Okay. but and it was on a coffee mug. But I think we put it off because we really don't want to do it. You know, even some things that would be productive for me and make me money and be great for my business, I'd like to assign that to somebody else to do, you know? And so when we get to the point, you know, homework when we were kids, or, you know, reports and things I had to get done for my corporate job, when push comes to shove, then you know, okay, I cannot procrastinate any longer. I have to just start. I have to put in these 2 hours or whatever it's going to take that I don't want to do, but I have to, so I can get on the other side of that. And I think a lot of it is, there is absolutely some truth to what Janet's been talking about, and Stuart, about the dopamine rush, the serotonin, you know, levels and things. And but if we wanted to do it, we would do it. We wouldn't put it off. You know, think of all the things you do in a day that you choose to do, and then the things that you put off. Those are the things because you don't want to get to them, assuming that the timing would be right anyway, and that you had all the components you need to do it. But just don't want to do it.
Well,
No, I don't know that for me that's correct. I'm hearing you, I'm listening, considering it, but I think there's things I want to do that I just don't have the energy to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have dealt with chronic fatigue for the last 37 years, but you know, but who's counting, right? But the thing is that sometimes it's just getting the stamina up to get it done. But I don't think I've just put things off because I don't want to do them. I don't think that's the complete answer for me. But I like exploring this with you guys because obviously I feel that I want to get to a different level with things. I'm always wanting to get to a better level, always. And if, you know, like I said, understanding things, you know, through discussion is really helpful for being able to get there.
And I just want to say, I agree totally. That's, it's a great point that Virginia made, but it's not, when you've been sick for a long time, chronic fatigue, dysautonomia, fibromyalgia, all that stuff, just to get up is an accomplishment. And I think my dopamine rush is coming from actually doing things. They're actually being done. But if you have some kind of a deficiency, you can't blame yourself and say, oh, I'm just lazy. If there's a deficiency, you can, Neville Goddard would find a way to overcome that. And maybe you need to read some Neville Goddard, because there is a way, and to constantly see yourself as healed and have, you know, talk to Neville Goddard. I've actually done that. I've had Neville Goddard tell me that I'm okay and things like that, but it's not, that's right. I talked to Neville Goddard, Bob. That's right. You think he's not really, he's just not here physically. So,
Does he talk back is the question. Do you get
yes,
answers?
he does.
All right.
Absolutely, he does. 100% he does. Stop. It's true. When I was better at it, I've lost my way in that. But when there are physical deficiencies, physiological deficiencies, it's not so easy to have that stamina to do the littlest thing. You know, you make yourself lunch. That may be all you can do for that day. I can only take a shower 2 times a week if I'm lucky. And I'm putting all my energy into getting this business going. And to dry my hair is a big deal. It takes so much out of me that I have to decide, am I going to lose 10 mugs or am I going to dry my hair? So I go for the mugs. And but I understand completely what you're going through. So don't feel bad.
Well, all right. And Missy, I don't see you as disabled in any way. Janet, same with you. Same with all of us here, right? We're quite able. and we work with what we've got. And the more we do it, what did Ralph Emerson say? Do the thing, and then you'll have the power. So do the thing, right? So even if it's just a little incremental thing, here's what I've noticed in my life, because we're talking about atomic habits, is in contrast to the burst of heroic energy, because I've procrastinated up to this point. If I'm prepared via habits, in other words, if I've created habits to predestine myself for an easy flowing experience in the moment of truth, that wins. Habits beat heroics, right? That's what I've discovered for myself, because I've done both, right? And where I could validate and rationalize, here's reasons why I can't right now, or I can't to the degree that I would like to. By taking incremental steps, I became more able. Ability begets ability. At least that's how it's occurred for me. Stuart, no need to raise hands here, brother. We got an intimate group. Just come on out.
Nice. Well, I know we're getting towards time here, but there were a couple of things I wanted to hit on chapter 10, but I don't know if, I'm sure you guys caught this, that he does a hat tip to Stephen Covey, right? And I thought that was kind of cool. And he was saying, he mentions, the habits of highly successful people, but then he says that we want to copy those, right?
Yes.
We imitate those, right? And that, reminded me of everything, or not everything, but some of the ththings that Napoleon Hill talks about and all that stuff. It's really about, look at the person who's successful, do that, and even going back to like Miracle Morning stuff, right? And, they interview all these people, and what's the common denominator for the successful people? They get up early, they have, quiet reflective time, they exercise, whatever the savers is and things like that. So I thought that was cool that he tips his hat to Covey. But in chapter 10, he starts talking about the causes of bad habits, and that it starts with your friends, right? And whether it's, smoking cigarettes behind the bowling alley or whatever, whatever that is for you, it's because, your peers or your friends or whatever it is. And he gets into this thing that really hit me, talking about reframing, right? There was the book about how to quit smoking, and it essentially was about reframing every cue or every trigger, and how do we change our habits, the bad ones, is by reframing the context for those things. And that we have underlying core motivations, right? And that goes back to all that survival instinct stuff, conserving energy, food and water, love and reproduction, connection with others, acceptance and approval, reducing uncertainty, creating stability, status and prestige, and things like that. And he says something that, and maybe John, you were thinking of this too, but he says our behaviors and our habits are dependent on how we interpret the events that happen to us, not the events themselves. And I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, but this is right out of Stoic wisdom, right? And Epictetus says it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it, right? These are all like this is like the gems of wisdom of how to live a happy and tranquil life. It's not that, shit happens to everybody, it's how you deal with it or whatever it is, right? And I don't think Epictetus said it quite that way.
Oh, I thought that was a direct quote.
But that's Llama Guy quote. Shit happens to everybody. That's how you deal with it. And then Marcus Aurelius says, our anger and annoyance are more detrimental to us than the things that anger and annoy us, right? Same kind of deal. Super cool, right?
Yeah.
Can you say that one more time, please? Because
Our anger and
Anger and annoyance
more detrimental.
are more detrimental to us than the things that anger and annoy
that
us.
is the problem of my life. Thank you.
I mean, it's the human race.
Talking and I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it all. One more time, please. One person.
Bob,
Stuart or Bob, whatever. One person.
Our anger and annoyance are more detrimental to us than the things that anger and annoy us.
right? It's our reactions to it. It's our interpretations of the events. And I will say that, I had a little bit, I have to sort of translate in my own vocabulary, because when somebody, he's saying that the things that happen to you, like it's almost this victim-y kind of thing, right? Because we all know that nothing happens to us, right? We attract, we are cause, right? So the events in our lives, we have responsibility for, whatever, however we want to talk about that. So I kind of had a little disclaimer in my own head about that. But then he says things like predictions, which are really thoughts, right, lead to feelings, which lead to cravings that we act upon, right? And of course, this reminded me, and John, you're going to have to remind me of where, we discussed this, but this thoughts, feelings, actions, right? Right. We have, thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions.
And actions lead to results, which you have thoughts about. And there's the upward or downward spiral. It's been in several books. I think one most recently that we read from, which included that, was The Power of Consistency by Weldon Long.
Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, I got a few more things to say about this, but I just
That's good.
really,
Well, here's the one thing I think we should probably end off on, and that's where he talked about in chapter 10 how to reprogram your brain to enjoy hard habits. And it was the one word shift, right? Imagining just changing have to
get to.
Yeah. I get to go like solve this problem. I get to go bust my ass in the gym, right? What an opportunity.
You
But
say
it
that
really
all
is
the
true.
time.
It
Right.
really is true. I mean, we're alive. And so we get to make decisions, and we make decisions. We get to be for you on purpose action, right?
Mhm.
And it is, well, I think being alive is a privilege, and I see it that way. And yeah, it's, I get to, not I have to.
Right. Right. I get to get off my ass and do work. Wow, what an opportunity. Right. So if we reframe it like that, because what Stuart was just talking about with the whole, the mindset of it that precedes, our choices to act or not act, if we could just get in the habit of thinking in that way, like an opportunity, like I get to do this, versus, begrudgingly, force and, oh man, this sucks, and all my story about it, that goes back to the Marcus Aurelius quote, right? So here's all my story about it. Here's all the suffering, right? Ken Keyes Jr. in his, I think, classic book, The Handbook to Higher Consciousness, which Stuart was one of the first like spiritual books that I ever read, right? Handbook to Higher Consciousness. Ken Keyes said, you add suffering to the world just as much when you take offense as when you give offense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do we have any aficionados of the great comic strip, The Far Side, in the
Sure.
group?
I don't know if I'm an aficionado, but I've
Well,
seen.
one of my favorite ones is there are two sailors sitting in a bar, and one sailor has a wooden leg. And he's talking to the other one and says, well, that's a good story, but let me tell you how I lost this. Well, the guy he's talking to has a peg head.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty humorous way of looking at, there's always somebody a little bit worse off than yourself.
Yeah.
And, cry the blues about your misfortunes, but you may have a peg leg, but someone out there, there's a guy with a peg head.
Yeah. I think they hold high office too.
I got a quick anecdote about reframing. Years ago, before when I was really just starting my business and I was still having to do other seasonal work, carpentry, restaurant work, things like that, whatever I had to do in the winter, to keep the bills paid. And I worked on a construction crew building what are called earth ships. And if you don't know what they are, you can Google it or look it up. It's a building style here in Taos, New Mexico, that's been considered the most sustainable forms of building. They're all off the grid. They've got, composting toilets and all this kind of stuff. But the construction is that they're made out of recycled tires that are pounded, rammed earth inside the tires. And so the walls are all these tires, but they're all packed with dirt and all this stuff. And so I worked on this crew 8 hours a day slinging a sledgehammer. And, I was in my late 20s at the time or whatever it was, but, $7 an hour on a chain gang or whatever it was. And it was brutal. And the first few days I came home crying like a baby to Leah, like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this anymore. It was just brutal, right? And all the people that I worked with were just like, oh, these buff people, because they spent 8 hours a day swinging these sledgehammers. And I almost quit. And I reframed it, and I was like, you know what? This is an 8-hour workout, and I get to, get myself in shape. I get to, and I don't know if I use those words or whatever, but I saw it as an opportunity to, as that I was getting paid to work out, right? And so whatever, again, just interesting how we look at things, right? And I think he says something like that too, like it's our perspective about things. It's how we look at things that shape our experience, right? Two people can have the same experience, and it's all about how you look at it that shapes how you feel about that experience.
There you go.
It's very true, Stuart. Very, very true. Today we announced in Ontario, we're lifting all of our limits except for mask wearing. So no more social distancing, no more, what am I trying to say? Oh my God, I'm so tired. No more capacity limits, right? That was what I was trying to say. So the gym is at full capacity. Now I haven't been able to get into the hot tub because it's a small hot tub, and you can't have 2 people in it and still do social distancing. So after my workout, like, I'm so tired because I spent an hour in the hot tub because I got to, and I was so excited. And everybody else was like, oh, maybe we're going too fast with lifting the limits. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm getting in the tub. I'm getting in the hot tub. Because we can now. And that is just a glorious way to look at it.
Freedom.
Yes. Oh, Canada.
Great national anthem. Great national anthem.
All right, guys. Well, it's so good to have this time with you. We ran a little bit over. Thank you all for being here. Next week, we'll cover the 3rd law, which is make it easy. That sounds good. I like that.
Yeah.
Anybody like the sound of
Yeah, I
that?
like
Make
that
it
one.
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. So feel free to invite a friend. Of course, this has been brought to you by the paying members of the John Lavenia Success Mastermind. Go check us out at jlsuccessmastermind.com. And in the meantime, you guys have a great week. All right. We will see you again.